I totally. I think at the moment, the platforms that we see getting wider adoption. I mean, Element is starting to get wider adoption, like the Matrix. And then we see platforms like Telegram and Signal getting increasing adoption. So I think there is a ground shift in this direction. Are we at the point where people have identified that they need crypto economics and decentralization in all of their interactions? No, definitely not. But are we moving in this direction? Yes. How fast will we get there? I don't know. 5 years, 50 years, who knows? I don't think we're there yet. I think there are valuable fruits to harvest along the way. Things that can improve, businesses, things that can provide people with value, but it's always, again, hard to decide how much to sort of veer from the track and kind of hand this like low-hanging fruit to them, but not spend your time on doing the important stuff versus just staying on target. And the reality is that we don't have that many resources. We're not like IBM, where we can kind of go off and do consulting for a ton of different enterprises and try and create a ton of different startups that are all using this technology in many different ways, and really trying to feel for where provide products and services that seem to be relevant today. Like there's a lot of different areas where this could happen, and Parity, for what it's worth, in the last 7-8 years that it's been around, it has dabbled in this. But the problem is it's resource intensive. Every coder that's building a prototype is not building core technology. And Parity is really, a while back, a few years back, we made the decision to really just double down on core technology and let the other people do the consulting.
You said before at Polkadot we're part of this first group, right? Very focused on developers, tech building. So you are on one side of the blockchain spectrum as an inventor, technologist, and experimenter, deep into tech building. You build the Ethereum and Polkadot blockchains, and both time you try to create something useful and complex, a complex protocol whose token value is linked to the protocol value creation. At least that's the goal. Before we mentioned the attention game. On the total opposite side of the crypto spectrum, we have the explosion of meme coins. No tech, no product. Just a token representing an internet meme. Yep. What's your honest take on meme coins?
I like to think of there's an ironic publication in the UK called Viz. It's a magazine that it's like a comic magazine that provides some quite fun social commentary. One of the adverts, I used to read it when I was a teenager, one of the adverts that I remember seeing, it has these adverts, like kind of classified adverts, kind of think they're small little box ads that you get in magazines. But its adverts are ironic. So they're actually part of the actual publication, they're not real, I think. One of them had some gizmo that was being marketed, like being advertised in the magazine, and the caption read, "No technological nonsense, just marketing breakthrough." And this is where I would place an awful lot of this industry, with meme coins being indeed the best example, the real prime example. I mean, it's bullshit. It's I can't express how bullshit I feel meme coins are, but kind of the same as NFTs, just NFTs, but multiplied by 1 billion issuance. And then even worse than meme coins that have their own chain are meme coins that are just a deployed smart contract. So they don't even have their own chain. It's not actually that anyone took any real effort in launching the meme coin.
Which is the case for most of them.
Which is the case for most of them.
You wrote the Ethereum yellow paper 10 years ago. 10 years later, Web3 is mostly a bunch of degenerates gambling addicts online, choosing to invest their money not in the builders of the infrastructure of tomorrow, but on pictures of their favorite memes. What the hell do we do now to get back on track and realize the post-Snowden web vision you laid out a decade ago?
The people are still there, right? The people are still there. They're the builders, the ideators, the crusaders. They're still there. It's just that they're now outnumbered because of all the new entrants. So the new people have come in, new money has come in, and this has altered the characteristics of the industry. But it's not that the original people have moved away, at least as far as I know. I know there's still a few of them around at least. It's just that they're not nearly as dense. Like the industry is not nearly as densely populated with them. We're never going to get it back to how it was, right? It's just not going to happen. I mean, we can make a new industry, I suppose, but no, I don't see that. We just have to like kind of live with it and try to make order from the sort of, I don't know, extract somehow the useful parts of this like now much bigger, much more populated industry than it was before, and try to sort of extract utility from having more people in the ways that it was. So, I mean, you know, there are ways of extracting utility from having lots of people around, right, or having more people around. Like, you know, generally, it's called crowdsourcing. Markets crowdsource to get better price discovery. If there's only a few participants in a market, price discovery is usually awful. If there are lots of participants, then it's usually better. Now, it does depend quite a lot on the characteristics of the participants, and if there is heavy selection bias, then towards, for example, speculators, then the market price will be based largely around speculation. Right? Similarly, if there are lots of people in a market that care about pictures of dogs, Shiba Inus or whatever, then there's going to be a lot of that's going to have a bias over some projects and others. So I mean, you know, if a market is full of people that concern themselves with underlying technology, if the market is largely based on future thinking, on the belief and the belief in technology's ability to actually make disruptive foundational changes to society, to unlock value, then that will be reflected, right? If the participants are mostly concerned about, betting, gambling on the next thing that makes a 5x, then that will be reflected in the market. And I think that's what we're seeing. So there needs to be a better way of, I don't know, sort of deriving utility from the fact that there are now many more participants that are not necessarily very technologically minded. Because I think at the end of the day, other than a great gambling platform, which is what crypto has delivered, the technology has still got quite a long way to go before it becomes relevant for building mass services worthy of mass adoption.
Crypto has been around for 15 years now, with Bitcoin in 2009 as a start. Yet, as you said, right? I would add something to paint a bit of a better picture. We still pretty much only have cross-border payments with stablecoins, store of value with Bitcoin, speculative store of value. And I would argue stablecoins could be a store of value for developing countries that have currency issues, and gambling, obviously. Why have we not been able to have more than that, to achieve more than that in 15 years?
It takes time for people to get to grips with a technology that does something so fundamental as allow people to trust each other without knowing each other. It's a really major shift of civilization. We have interacted with institutions for centuries as a means of trusting, as a means of mitigating against malevolent behavior of strangers. This is just, it's baked into our mindset, into the mindset of people. I would say the world over. I don't know that many people living in certain parts of the world, but I think broadly speaking the world over, and certainly the Western world, certainly places where institutions are powerful and a bit at least trustworthy. And in places where institutions are not powerful or not trustworthy, they're maybe a little bit more minded to working in these more peer-based technologies, and that's possibly one of the reasons why cross-border payments actually is a use case that has seen wide adoption, because usually one end of the cross-border payment has fairly underdeveloped or not so trustworthy institutions. I don't think it's used that much in cross-border payments between like France and Spain. I think it's typically used in remittances. It's hard to, and it's not like we see practitioners now that start to get it. They start to be able to ideate under these assertions, under these assumptions. The assumptions of a trust-free world, right? A trustless world, of building trustless services. But actually having people understand that, like the actual consumers of these services, hard. And explaining to them the value in it, very hard. Now, there is inherent value to be expressed in terms of money in using trust-free services. You don't need an institution to trust, therefore the institution isn't going to be taking 5, 10, 25% from the transaction. This is, I think, is why your financial use cases are the most immediate, obvious use case. So, I mean, when you gamble, the house wins. Right? That's the deal. The house always wins. They will take a significant percentage, regardless, and therefore you get better. You get a better financial outcome if you gamble in using kind of crypto. I mean, theoretically, at least. With cross-border payments, it's the same. You're not paying Western Union 10+% in order to process a transaction. With NFTs, it could be argued it's also the same thing. Like high-value artwork NFTs, you can usually transfer between owners for substantially less than you would transfer a high-value piece of actual physical artwork for. I mean, if for no other reason that you can very quickly check the transaction history of an NFT and check to see what the real market value is. You can buy and sell it with a relatively small markup, and I think these points alone, like it's very easy to verify if it's genuine. I mean, genuine NFTs seems a bit silly, but in theory, if you buy into the idea of any NFTs being genuine, then you can very easily verify this. Unlike with a real piece of artwork, that can be forged, and then you have to kind of check previous owner and all the rest of it. This is actually possibly one of the more useful things that NFTs can do. They could actually function as virtual receipts for real artwork. And then the idea is the NFT will be passed around with a physical piece, and you'll very easily be able to check that it's genuine. But that's a different thing. So I think, I think it's not especially surprising that the initial use cases have focused around finance. Just because the world of finance is so institutionalized and so, I don't want to say corrupt, but there's a lot of people taking, a lot of rent seekers, right? A lot of institutions taking a very large percentage for basically doing nothing other than being the place that is trusted. People can understand having 25%, having their international transfer being 25% cheaper. It's a lot harder to make people understand that purchasing their loaf of bread being only a penny or two cheaper is much better. I mean, you know, it's an argument, but it's a much more harder argument to get across. And then trying to convince people that actually they really don't want to trust the bank because, you know, banks go bust, or banks are not transparent, or banks stop your account if they decide to, or if they make a mistake. This is all stuff that most people are not that interested to hear. And you're looking at, until the world becomes sufficiently chaotic that centralized institutions really start falling down, you're looking at a very hard argument to make. Unfortunately, that world is coming. I mean, it's fortunate for crypto, it's fortunate for Web3 practitioners, it's unfortunate for everyone else. But if you go to, like, for example, Sweden, you'll find that the heavily centralized financial system breaks down on an almost daily basis. Maybe that's harsh. Maybe it's more like a weekly basis. But still, it breaks down, and it breaks down badly. Now, Sweden doesn't have the fallback of cash. Almost nowhere accepts cash as a payment method in Sweden. It's all about credit cards, and credit card processing systems are all extremely centralized. And it turns out apparently quite attackable by probably Russian hackers. As we see an increasingly polarized world going to, sleepwalking into a Cold War, I think we will increasingly see centralized systems be attacked, and we'll see the holes in them, and we'll look increasingly for resilient systems. And the most resilient way of architecting IT, like massively multi-user IT systems that we know of thus far, is crypto economics and decentralization.
I saw you have a tattoo on your biceps.
Oh, yeah. Did you?
You have only, yes, not there.
It's underneath.
Yeah. It's a QR code?
No.
Do you have another one that is a QR code?
No.
Because I read somewhere, because I saw this tattoo there. I thought it was this one.
No, I don't have a QR code. There is a sort of artistic representation of a 256-bit identifier there, but it's not a QR code.
So this is the one, right?
Yeah.
What does it represent?
Represents someone. I think it's Raul Romanuti's public key on Kusama.
Is this linked to this proof of ink thing that you're working on?
Yeah, so this is the Kusama Society. It's a sort of membership society. I think there's somewhere between 150 and 200 people in it at the moment. They each have a tattoo that links to the previous person in the society, the previous person that joined the society. So it's like a human blockchain, if you like. Each human sort of being a block and referencing the previous human with a cryptographic identifier. Every human has their public-private key pair, and they are referenced by their public key. So this is, I think, Raoul's public key, and then someone else has my public key that they have a tattoo in their tattoo, and someone has their public key, and all the way. It was an early, it's a little bit of a, it's an experiment. It was a social experiment to try to understand, are people, is this just madness? Is anyone actually going to get a tattoo? Like, if it's just like on a blockchain with really very little incentivization, just for fun, basically. And they did, and it sort of gave me a data point, gave me to understand what resources I had available for building future systems, like going all the way back to the beginning of the conversation. Inventors, like innovators. Innovation is about taking the components you already have and recombining them in certain ways. And I wanted to see if this was really a component that I could count upon. And it seems that it is. So yes, the thing that I presented more recently is the individuality system in Polkadot. Individuality, I think, is something that is absolutely required for us to become a mass market, I'm not even thinking about markets, a mass adopted technology base platform. Systems that work in the real world with real people need to understand what a real person is. Blockchain does not do that. When Satoshi launched Bitcoin, all Bitcoin understood was a cryptographic key pair. That was its basic form of interaction with the real world. Ethereum didn't change anything in that regard. Polkadot, not so much either. It made things a little bit more general, but it didn't really alter the fact that this cryptographic identifier was how external entities external to the blockchain world, interacted with the blockchain, like identified themselves. And this is something that I think needs to be changed. All of the stuff thus far that tries to build in humans to blockchain has been like to allow blockchain systems to recognize humans. And when I say recognize, I mean recognize a human from a rock, not recognize a human from another human. Right? This is the difference between identity and individuality. And when I talk now, I talk only about individuality. It's a subtle difference for reasons that I can go into, but it is a very important difference. So, individuality, recognizing a human from a rock, not a human from another human. Blockchain systems, when they do need to recognize a human from a rock, there are a few different ways of doing it. They mostly boil down into centralized systems that are just where there's a person, a key holder, an institution or an organization, often profit-based, that plays the role of kind of giving out passports, giving out ID cards, virtual digital ID cards, but still, they're the ones that get to decide you're a person, you're not, you're a rock. Yeah. Unfortunately, this isn't really Web3. It's definitely not Web3 at all. And there's only a very, very, very small number that sort of do it in line with Web3 ideals, and those ones tend to be very limited in adoption and not so. Their assumptions on what people will do to actually go through this process seem to be broken. Like, because their adoption numbers are so low and because they've limited themselves to this specific process. And so what the project I'm working on, this individuality project, can do is, firstly, it's a multi-process mechanism. So it's not focused around a single procedure or paradigm of proving individuality. The idea is that there are at least 3, and maybe more. And it avoids solving the problem of identity in order to solve individuality, which is what almost every other system thus far has done. This is a big problem. If you solve identity to solve individuality, what you're essentially doing is you're saying, give me all of your details, and by using your details, I will say that you are a human being. But you shouldn't need to know all of my details just to say I'm a human being. Yeah? This is like governments do this. They issue a passport by knowing all of your details. And then you will take your passport, and they will know that you're an individual human being, that you are able to vote, for example. Now, your vote is fungible. Your vote is the same as any other person's vote. In order to vote, you only need to prove that you're an individual. But when you vote, you will invariably show all of your identity details to the voting office to prove that you are an individual and that you are unique, that you haven't voted yet. This is the problem. That almost all systems, I find it very difficult to think of a system that doesn't do this, prove individuality through identity. And this means giving up privacy. And sometimes that's a big deal. For example, vote the wrong way in a dictatorship, and you may end up regretting it. We need systems that do not force us to give up our identity when we take part as a citizen in processes that are non-reliant on specifically who is taking part in the process.
You mentioned human and rocks.
Yeah.
There's another non-human element that is becoming more and more prominent.
Yep.
You don't tweet much, but you tweeted AI, more trust, less truth.
Mm-hmm.
Is AI a bad thing?
It certainly makes the world a lot more complicated. Is it a bad thing? Not wholly, no. AI is, I can think of at least one area where AI is great, and I'm very happy it exists. But I can think of a lot of areas where it massively complicates the situation that society finds itself in now. The area, for what it's worth, where it's great, is music. Having AI, we can analyze music much better than we used to be able to, like to the point where it makes my knowledge of music analysis obsolete. And I did a PhD in it like 20 years ago. It's now the rules are rewritten, and there are so many things that you can do now that you would have just been impossible before. So it's almost magical for music. But when we talk about the things, particularly its interactions in the Web3 sphere, it's essentially the opposite of Web3. Like, it's a sort of diametrically opposed to the principles and ideals of Web3. And this is problematic for Web3 crusaders.
As someone who is consistently 5 to 10 years, if not more, ahead of the curve, what does the world look like in 5 to 10 years when AGI has taken over?
AI is a fundamentally new way of enabling human communication. So I think we have to understand where the world is going in 5 to 10 years, we have to look at the fundamentals. The fundamentals for AI are, so the world is still a world of humans, right? I think it's too early to start saying, okay, it's Skynet, right? We're going to be fighting the AI. How is the AI going to make machines to fighters, and what those machines going to be? I think that's more of a 20 to 50 years sort of time scale, maybe even longer. So let's like dial it back. The world is still humans. Humans communicate. That's the nature of like human cooperation. Humans need to communicate with each other, right? In the old, very old days, humans would communicate face to face. And because of this, there were basically villages and towns. And, if you wanted to send a message to another town, you'd either have to go there yourself. Like, if you want to communicate with someone in another town, you'd have to go there yourself. Or you could maybe give them courier a message, and then they would courier it over, and you'd wait a few days and maybe get a message back. All very difficult, time-consuming, very hard to, coordinate, interact. That's like one-to-one. And then we've got like one-to-one remote systems like phone calls, right? Where you make a phone call or send a mail, and you can do, again, one-to-one messaging, but remotely. And the difference between a phone call and a letter or a telegram is that it's the letter is more asynchronous, right? The phone call is synchronous. You actually wait for the response. You block until you get a response. Like, you stay silent. Then we had radio, wireless, which gave us one-to-many, and then television, which gave us visual one-to-many, again remote. We actually had one-to-many before radio and TV, which was stage. Right? Many people gathered as an audience, but again very limited in scale. With radio and television, the scale went huge, and society changed accordingly. We ended up with regional accents being lessened. We ended up, the number of social repercussions are probably like too many to name here, but politics changed, right? The nature of war changed, global politics changed, not just local. Democracies, large democracies could exist. And the nature of being a politician changed. It became much more important to be someone that could explain things over air, or look nice on TV, be photogenic. The nature of almost every part of society changed in some way when this communication changed. Now the internet came along, and this facilitated remote many-to-many communication. Suddenly everyone could communicate with everyone else cheaply at the same cost. And this gave rise to huge new changes in society, some of which are still just playing out now. Social media affecting politics being a very notable one. AI is another fundamental change in human communication. Humans, when AI becomes in general use, or AGI or whatever becomes in general use, humans will no longer communicate directly with each other. They will communicate to the AI. The AI will communicate possibly to another AI, and then that AI will communicate to the human. Essentially, everything is going to be intermediated by some non-linear, non-trivial transformation. Now, if this were, just an isolated device, it would be one thing. And there's probably already examples of isolated device intermediating and transforming human communications. I can't think of any offhand, but there might be some. But it's different with AGI. Certainly the way AGI is going, and if you listen to people like Sam Altman and the way that the movers and the shakers in the industry want it to go, it is not going to be isolated. This communication, this intermediation, this non-linear, non-trivial intermediation between basically every human, that's the idea anyway, would go through not merely a system, but a networked system. A system that is quite possibly run by a for-profit enterprise. Quite possibly controlled by a single government. Now this is crazy, right? This is a very this is a mad idea. Imagine if rather than me talking to you, I talked to you and I had through like Facebook, but with the knowledge that what I told to you wasn't necessarily what I wrote, and with the knowledge and acquiescence. Like I had no belief that it would be. I would just be believing that what you were reading or listening to was kind of in my interest, kind of what I wanted to get across. What it means is that there is now a separate entity. Now you can call this entity, if you like, OpenAI or Facebook or whatever, but you can identify it, or the US government, you can identify it with a specific legal institution if you want. I think that this is naive, but in any case, there is an entity that is now intermediating in a non-trivial fashion all communication between people. This is the world that we're moving towards, and it's pretty mad. And the communication isn't limited to directly human-to-human communication, but it's also systems that are not. So when we interact, one of the ways is that I talk to you and you listen. Another one of the ways, just as important, but not really considered, is that I might write software that you use. Now, this is a way that I interact with you. It's not exactly direct, but it's still, I have an effect on your life. Like you run an Ethereum node. If I wrote the software or some of the software for that, or I designed some of the software for that, then that has now an effect on you. AI is also moving into this sphere as well, with things like not just me like writing, not just being an intermediator for articles I might write or conversations I might have, but also for software I might write. It can alter in imperceptible ways, potentially. And I mean, it does. I see this every day. I write software, I write the grey paper, and I see it, offering me up ideas for what I might want to write. Sometimes I'm lazy and I go along with it before I realize actually the thing that it's proposed is slightly different to what I wanted to say. And I go back and I erase it all and I actually write what I wanted to say. I'm pretty finicky about what I write. A lot of people are not. Before long, it's not hard to imagine a world where people are not really writing what they want to write. They're writing what the AI is guessing they might want to write. Not long after that, it's not that hard to imagine a world that it's not the AI that's guessing. The AI actually has quite a specific intention of writing this, not quite what the person wants to write, but something that makes sense. Maybe that's biased in a particular way. At this point, we're not going to be talking to each other. We're only going to be interacting with I hate to use these horrible buzz terms, but for want of a better word, a super intelligence that is essentially an overlord that is listening in on everyone's conversations and altering them. And maybe they're not altering them in particularly obvious perceptual ways, but they are altering them. Now, the other thing to think about is that maybe it's not specifically a profit motive of Facebook or OpenAI or Microsoft or whatever, or even a power motive of the US or China. Maybe if we start thinking about Darwinism, survival of the fittest, which I have a fervent belief that all systems that are able to change over time succumb to, then we can begin to imagine a world where not only is everything intermediated by this AI that's listening in and nudging things in the right direction, in what it call in a direction, right? Let's not assume that it's got such a big grand plan yet. Well, the AI wants. an AI that is perpetuated is necessarily more powerful than an AI that is not perpetuated. In exactly the same way that a biological life form that can live longer is more able to have a greater impact on the world than a life form which does not live longer. All other things being equal, dies sooner. In biology, it just is more likely to be able to reproduce, right, and keep its genetics going. Well, it's sort of the same thing with AI. We can imagine an AI that has, since AIs are capable of gathering information about the world, and since an AI has no, all other things being equal, the AI that sticks around longer is the one that is more capable of creating the circumstances allowing it to stick around longer. In essence, what we're doing is providing an incentivization system for AIs to persist themselves. Like, that's sort of what's naturally there. And for that matter, improve themselves. And the improvement of an AI is going to be based largely upon the sort of computational machinery that it's available to it. And I think if you squint your eyes, you can already see this kind of AI as a life form. I mean, AI is maybe not quite a life form, but AI is as an actor in a Darwinist model. You can already kind of see it forming. OpenAI was started off as a public good organization, right? It was started off as a foundation. In theory, the foundation still controls OpenAI. In reality, I think it's quite different. And we already see the imperative of getting more GPU power to the AI as taking over all other factors in the evolution of this company, of this organization. Essentially, it's the AI that wants the GPU power, right? It's the AI that's sort of commanding the humans in some sense, right? Again, if you squint your eyes, it's 1 point on the map. It's no longer the original mission of the institution that is the driving factor. If it were, then this wouldn't be a conversation. In reality, the participants here are Microsoft, Sam Altman, the developers behind it, and to some degree, the members of the board. And over time, I've tried to find this quote. I can't find it, but I do remember reading that it was a quote. So there's a book written by, what's his name? Popper, philosopher from 20th century. The Open Society and Its Enemies. It was quite an influential book, published, I think, in the 60s. And it's one of the things that it posits is any institution, any social organization will, regardless of its mission, ultimately have a primary driver as retaining its own existence. Essentially, pointing out, I mean, if you sort of simplify it a little bit, essentially pointing out that social institutions are fundamentally Darwinist as well. I think it's not hard to sort of draw the parallel here in OpenAI and in the AI itself to some degree. It's about not so much guaranteeing existence, but even retaining relevance is the primary factor here. And it's the factor regardless of the mission. The mission was meant to be public good, but It's hard to see that now.
What role does decentralization play in the future of AI?
I mean, there's a few ways that AI could be decentralized. One of them that's put forward in the crypto ecosystem is having something like a blockchain that's like an AI blockchain and that could fund an AI model. Don't really see this as being viable, mostly because AI models are things that can be sort of improved upon incrementally. You can take a base model and feed more data into it and make it better at a particular thing, or maybe at everything. All you're really doing is with the initial training is kind of using up, like kind of getting it to a point, paying a lot of money and getting it to a point of trainedness, of intelligence. It's still possible to train it further and make it more intelligent, particularly if you have access to more data. So any blockchain-based AI model would probably have to have open data, which instantly means it's open to everybody, including private enterprise, and will probably have open weights, which means it's the training that they're doing, and spend, I don't know, 20 million plus on training this AI model with the open data, would again be usable by private enterprise. And the thing is, they won't have to pay for it, so they could take that as a baseline and then just improve it further and spend their money not on just training from scratch, but training from there, essentially improving their own product but keeping it private. So I don't quite see the economic viability of decentralizing in this way. I think it's probably just going to have the effect of improving everybody's models. Now you could argue, well, it's going to improve the open source models a lot more than it would improve the private models. Yeah, you're probably right. But I think it's still not like a winning concept of like decentralization. The private models will still have a significant advantage. Another way of decentralizing is sort of edge compute, which is basically where rather than sending your query to a central server and have the central server run the query through the system for you and then send you the answer back, as is what currently happens with most of the chatbots, you instead download the model and run the queries yourself in private. It's a much better proposition, I would say, in terms of decentralization. The problem is it's a little bit like earlier blockchain. It's like running a full node. It's quite resource intensive, and maybe not everyone, maybe most people indeed, don't really want to be extending that. Maybe most people are happy to give up their privacy, give up their self-sovereignty, in order to avoid the need to perform that edge compute. And have like a device that can do the edge compute even. So I also don't see this as necessarily very economically viable model of decentralization in AI. AI, I think, is pretty fundamentally centralized. Like it's about building a single, coherent, intelligent model of the world and then using that. And I think the more that it's like concentrated in one place, the more powerful it is. And power seems to be what, like power of reasoning, power of knowledge seems to be what AI is providing. So overall, I fear that decentralization is not going to be a thing for a while at least.
In the very beginning of this podcast, we mentioned, you talked about happiness. You stepped down from your CEO role at Parity Technologies in 2022 because being chief executive had limited your ability to pursue what you call eternal happiness. What is eternal happiness?
I don't know. Did I say that?
I read that.
Okay. I don't think I said it. The reason I stepped down was very simple. Running a company is a very particular skill set, and it's not something that I'm particularly skilled at. Like my skill, my talent is, I can maybe invigorate people. I can I can have people make people very excited about getting certain pieces of work done, but a CEO has to really run a company, and if you want to do this in a broader way, like if you want to like sort of interact with people outside of the company in a much the same way, it's a bit weird. It's like your focus should be on the company itself, not on the community in some sense, not on a wider project. As CEO, I was often bogged down with decisions in finance, operations, marketing, day-to-day stuff. Now, I wasn't like the COO, I wasn't the CFO. It's not like I was inundated with this stuff, but it was still a significant concern, a significant source of stress. And, there's a reason academics are just sort of left to their own devices in an office to come up with, the next major idea. It's because stress really inhibits this kind of thought. And so being CEO of a company that actually had to think about, its finances and its payroll and its employees and its culture and all this other stuff, it's not conducive to being productive in the space of like intelligent discourse and ideation and even like architecting and development. So the reason that I left the role was really to refocus on this side of things, and I think by and large that's been a really great decision. Very happy with it.
Are you happy?
There's a lot of factors in happiness, as far as the blockchain stuff is concerned, I'm fairly happy. I think I'm very happy with Jam and the way that Jam's going. This is like actually one of the more fun times in my blockchain career to be able to do this project.